sometimes YouTube, when you watch the YouTube thing afterwards, it seems like the Hangout's been recording for like 10, 15 seconds before you even press the button.
I
So
know.
how they do that, I don't know. So let me just start before I introduce the lovely Molly Gordon, let me just start by apologising to everybody for anything that I might have said that's on the front page.
And if I seem to have said anything offensive, it wasn't me.
No, it was me. I'm quite happy to. And me, Julian Freeman from the Stars of Wellbeing, and my guest tonight, my fellow conversationalist, is the lovely Molly Gordon from Shaboom. Is it Shaboom Inc?
Yep, Shaboom Incorporated.
Fantastic. And remind me that it comes from a song where the refrain is,
Life could be a dream.
"Life could be a dream." Isn't that fantastic?
Yeah.
Well, a great place to start. Now, this is called showing. We would like discussing what we might talk about tonight. And you said 3 words in one of the email trails, and that was for me was like the bingo moment that we've got it, which is like you said, following what shows up.
Mm-hmm.
And that's really interesting. It certainly fits with my living from wisdom thing that I've been trying to practice for the last for this whole year, I guess. Yeah, no, today's been a really ordinary day, following what shows up. But following what shows up is like kind of going with the flow. Is that the same thing? Following what shows up, going with the flow?
Interesting. Is that the same thing? I think the spirit of it is the same, Julian. I'm just checking in to see if I see any real difference there. There's a sense in following what shows up for me that there's a little bit of a sense of engagement with what shows up. It might be just a touch more engaged than going with the flow, but that's entirely made up, you know. But that's what comes to me in this moment.
So there's interesting. So I have a great example of, like, last weekend I did a talk. This is a great example for me of going with the flow. And I put on the when I wrote to do this talk, I don't know, 4 months ago, I put "The Power of Love." That'd be a fantastic title for a talk. And I didn't have a clue what that talk means, you know. But I was kind of like, oh, it'll sort itself out, given a bit of, you know, it'll come, what's meant to be said. And I got to like a week before, like last week, and I still didn't have a clue what I was going to say. In fact, in a way, I find it quite hard to articulate. If I think about it, I find it quite hard to articulate what love is. Does that make sense?
Made sense to me.
Cool. But something came to me, which was there were 2 guys that I know that lived locally to where I was going to give the talk, and I thought, I know, I'll get in touch with them, and I bet you they can help me with this talk. And I got in touch with them, and one of them was Sean. He's never done any public speaking before, so he was like absolutely excited about the prospect of being able to talk to a group. And I thought, what a great, as we talked about it, it was like, we can all talk about our own experiences of, you know, how love occurs for us, what it feels for us, it shows up. And then it so it's like, oh, I've got a good feeling about this talk now. And then when the day came, and the guy, I went to video a guy, I do a bit of videoing of people to help them get their message out there. And the guy before me was like talking about how he's a horse healer, and he was talking about it's all completely done from love. And I was like, fantastic, can you come and be in my talk so that you can discuss your so I had another person, and then Sean had a friend who arrived, and he hadn't seen her for 2 years, and you know, they had a big hug and and I was like, oh, you're coming to the talk then. And sort of all of a sudden we had this whole group of people that showed up. The room was absolutely full, and the three or four of us shared our ideas on what how love shows up and all the rest of it. And it was absolutely perfect. People came out of the room saying it was inspiring and they'd really enjoyed it and da da da. And it wasn't the talk; it was like a discussion. It was like the group, because everybody knows what love is, right? And so to me, that's a perfect example of going with the flow, and probably also following what shows up, because as wisdom was occurring for me, the pieces of the jigsaw were like falling into place.
Mm-hmm.
That's a great example of, I suppose then you feel like you're going with the flow because it's kind of effortless. It's kind of all falling into place, just like that. But going with the flow, for me, almost also has a connotation of, you're not having to paddle.
Right.
Or are you having to paddle? Are you having to do a lot of effort to make it happen?
Well, I don't see you having to do a lot of effort, but I think of it as, I don't see work or a certain kind of effort as a problem. I like digging in my garden. I like creating things, and there's a kind of effort that goes into that. But it's not a struggle. It's not effort against something. It's effort that's moving with or in alignment with. So I think of going with the flow or following what shows up in terms of aligning my work, putting my energy in the same direction as what's showing up, and receiving the things that show up and playing with them. So there's a kind of exchange of back and forth with what's unfolding. Does that make sense to you?
Yeah, it definitely did happen that way. It was kind of, I suppose I had some wisdom came to me to contact these two guys, but then we kind of talked about it, and their ideas were starting to come into the pot, and that was when this idea about a discussion was forming, and then we managed to, other people showed up, and we just kind of got them involved too. So at a certain point, it seems to me that you need to do a little bit of steering or a little bit of paddling just to kind of keep the whole thing perfectly aligned, if you sort of.
Right. Yeah. You can be swimming with the current. And
that's where that metaphor, I struggle with it a bit, because from my sailing days, and actually there's a really good point. From my sailing days, when you're going against the prevailing wind and waves, it's really, the boat is crashing down and it's not going very fast. Actually, it feels like it's going very fast because the wind, you can feel the wind and the waves and the motion of the boat and all that kind of stuff. Very, as my French captain once said, sportif. Mm-hmm. But if you go the other way, down the wind and down the waves, you're actually going much, much faster, but the sense of wind is dropped away and the sense of the motion has changed completely. And so I think what happens for me, before the principles and before my living from wisdom sort of adventure, I would plot a plan to go from A to B, from point A to point B, and then I would head directly from one to the other, regardless of the current or the alignment or any of that kind of stuff. And it would be hard. It would be sportif,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
to the point where you're kind of expecting, like, that's the way life should be. That's the way life is.
Exactly. Yeah, but it's easy to get into living from that place. And I think that metaphor works in a lot of ways, because we can become our identities can get attached. We attach an identity to the effort, to the wind and the crashing wave, and we think we're really doing something. I am making some things happen here. I'm rocking and rolling.
Yeah.
And our identity gets fed, the ego gets fed by the effort and kind of by the sound and fury that's being generated.
Yeah. And then the other side to that so the big change, I mean, it is a huge change, the difference between heading into the wind and heading downwind, you know? Because when you're heading downwind, when you're going with the flow, often it feels like absolutely nothing's happening. No, it feels like you're completely motionless, yet you're moving, you know?
Right.
And you feel like you should be doing something, you know?
Right.
That's, you know, I made that post on the 3 principles of mind, consciousness, and thought about some group dynamics that we've got going on that are, you know, not how I would love them to be, but it and the going with the flow thing is that's how it is right now in that group.
Mm-hmm.
And to try and do something is going to it won't necessarily help. It's just that my ego thinks I can take charge of it and make something happen, or I ought to.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And I think there are times, and I think I said something like this on that post. There are times when it will occur to us to say something or do something to intervene in a situation that seems dysfunctional or if people are unkind. But there's a big difference between coming from an inspired place where my ego isn't attached to the result of what I'm about to do, what I'm about to offer to the group, what I'm about to say. That's really different than thinking that things have to change and I'm going to do something here that's going to make them change. So there's an attachment to results that's different. There's attachment to being right that's different. And sometimes it will just come to us. It will come to me to say in a group, to say something that might change the directions of things. But it makes a big difference whether I'm attached to that happening or not.
Yeah, no, and as I put on that thread, it's about, there's a lovely French phrase called laissez-faire, which means you just live what is, basically, you know.
Mm-hmm.
That to me is you had somebody come back with a comment or a question about, you know, how do you, I can't remember the exact words of it, but how do you keep, you know, heart and in time.
Right. I've got that here actually. She says, I'd love to hear ways you and Julian stay heartened and keep moving into trust, recognizing it's a human process.
And that's really what occurs to me, and it's really relevant, is that while you're, and you know, I think before we got on this tour, I was kind of joking with you about that song Bob Bob Bobbing Along, but you know, it does. That's what heartens me, is that actually I don't need to do any. I'm just floating on what is, you know,
Mm-hmm.
and it's when I try and do stuff that. So on the one hand, it's when I try and do stuff that isn't what is, that it's what I'd like it to be.
Mm-hmm.
That's some struggle starts there.
Right.
And on the other hand, just there's a security in knowing that what is, you know, it's a flow. It's stuff is happening. People are coming into my life. Events are happening. You know, you don't ever know what could happen as a result of you and I talking tonight. You know.
Right.
But that's got some real. It seems to me that, like the talk last weekend, and it all fell into place, and that's always possible.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. You know, I think there's another aspect of staying heartened that comes to me, and that is I don't always feel heartened. I'm a human being, and having a human experience, there are days when I feel disheartened, and I'm having disheartened thinking, and it's really, I was sharing this with a friend yesterday and had a client just get this yesterday. The great thing about understanding the principles for me isn't that I never feel disheartened anymore, that I'm always heartened, I'm always trusting the process. The wonderful thing for me about this understanding is that I don't have to be afraid of being disheartened. I don't take disheartened as meaning anything significant. I recognize that it's simply a symptom of my thinking in the moment, and that because it's a disheartened feeling, because I'm not feeling peaceful, I know to discount that thinking and to not invest a lot in that thinking. It may hang around for a little while, but I don't give it a lot of energy. And so there are kind of two levels to the trust. One is that I trust in something bigger. I trust in the intelligence that's at work, healing cuts on our bodies, causing trees to grow, bringing new thought in every moment. So that's the bigger field of trust. And that's big enough that if in the moment I'm not trusting, that doesn't have to freak me out, because I know that will change.
No, I get you. I mean, today for me has been really quite a humdrum day. It's been at the surface. There's nothing, like the weekend was fantastic. Lots of great stuff going on, and you're like high on the crest of the wave. And today's been like almost like the bottom of the swell that inevitably comes.
Mm-hmm.
It's just cyclical, isn't it? I mean,
yeah, it seems to be. Seems to be. We have ups and downs. I've talked about this a fair amount in the principles community. There's a way in which I would love for a spiritual understanding to insulate me from being sad, unhappy, angry, worried, jealous. I would love for this understanding to mean I never had to feel crappy again. But that's not my experience. I'm still a human being. But what it has done is that I don't have to be afraid of those experiences ever again.
I don't think I was ever afraid of it. I think if I go back to the A to B world, if I can call it that, you kind of try and control stuff, or I did anyway, and then that meant I'd kind of get into I don't want things to be particularly bad, and I'm happy to sacrifice that they're not going to be particularly good in order to stay on a level. Do you see what I mean?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And that meant that you were kind of like flatlining.
Mm-hmm.
And then I sensed a kind of gentle descent, into more and more, anxiousness and worry and bad feeling. And that, I think, is where a lot of people who come to this understanding are when they kind of they've just gently descended into a kind of valley, into a kind of a trench, a groove, whatever you want to call it, and to see that they're looking. A lot of people in these kind of communities are looking for that pursuit of happiness, that I want to be happy all the time thing. Now, of course, you don't get that, but I totally agree with you that even on a humdrum day like today, I can see that it's just the swell, it's just the bottom of the swell, and it'll change. And it might not feel that great in comparison to Saturday and Sunday, but I know that it'll come back up. I've got a sense of that, which is great.
Mm-hmm.
And I've also got a sense that who is it? Somebody at the weekend said something about you understand your life looking backwards, and you can never see what it is looking forwards, kind of thing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And that also, I think that's a great thing to do occasionally, because when you look back, you get to see how wisdom has been working for you, how the right things have been coming in at the right time in your life, and how it's always okay.
Absolutely. Absolutely. The very fact that you're able to look back it occurs to me as evidence that it's okay. You are.
Yeah, you're quite right. You're quite right. You're quite right. So I think with what the principles does, and that's a thing that's kind of like a very, I think that a thing that I had to get used to, a bit like you were saying just now, is it introduces that nature of life back to you. I moved away from this flatlining to allowing life to happen in a much more natural way, which means that some days you have really great days, and other days you don't, because that's just who we are as human beings.
Right.
But I think that if I contrast the two, the highs, when you crest the wave and surf off it for a little while, that's worth having. To be at the bottom of the next wave and having that contrast between the two it's all valuable compared to the controlling it and slow gentle descent that you get the other way. Which I always remember that. I think it's on Sid Banks on the Long Beach lectures talking about how's that working for you, your lifestyle, the successful lifestyle that you've got, how's that working for you with all the anxiousness and worry and all the rest of it. Right. And it's a killer point, really, isn't it?
It truly is. It truly is. And I think, I don't remember in which books or videos, but he speaks so clearly of, success in his terms is contentment, happiness, peace. And if you've got that, you've got it nailed. and you can have all kinds of material things and status and prestige, and so many of the things that we worry about have nothing to do with whether or not we can feel peaceful, connected, happy, and they're just irrelevant to that.
Yeah. Yeah. So going with the flow, following what shows up, for me, has been a lot more this year about living from a feeling. And the lady who's been showing me that is Elsie Spittle, of course, because that's, she talks about our true nature and letting that feeling guide you, when that's you. I'm now using my own words and not doing it the way that she would. But that's been really big for me this year, because it's, and even, it's not just this year, but that sense of, again, going back to my flatlining life, my previous, A to B life, you'd be walking through life and your feelings would be, alarm bells would be going off in your head, and you'd be getting stress and all these kind of other things going on, and you just write it off to that's the way life is.
Mm-hmm.
There's that whole, when the going gets tough, the tough get going. More old music,
right?
But and I always thought a bit like that. It was like, if it's tough, it's good.
Mm-hmm.
We're making progress.
Absolutely. There's a psychiatrist named Thomas Hora, Hora.
Yeah.
I learned about him recently in one of the 3 principal communities on Facebook from another practitioner. And Hora talks about peace, appreciation, gratitude, and love. That's his way of describing the feeling that I think Elsie is talking about. When we're in a place of peace, appreciation, gratitude, and love, that's a place from which you can trust your decisions, trust your thinking. And if you're out of those qualities, then maybe it's not so smart to trust your thinking. Maybe that's a time to step back and wait until something wiser emerges. But I just find those 4 words to be good descriptors, because people say, so what's the feeling? What's the feeling to live by? And I think those do a good job of describing it.
There are two things that come to mind. I mean, first of all, that you know, you have an inbuilt guidance system. I mean, when I wrote my book, absolutely the first piece of, you know, it's chunked into three parts, and the third part is kind of my early versions of my insights, my big insights about life, the ones that I can articulate, because there are ones that you don't articulate, of course.
Okay.
And it was about feelings. You know, so your feelings are, I call it my feelings barometer. They're a full-time, you know, guidance system, basically, that you have built in, working for you. So although you've just mentioned the good ones, there are also a bunch of bad ones, which aren't bad at all. They're just going, no, don't go that way.
They're like helpful detour signs that say, yeah, don't take a right. A friend of mine says, you know, the bridge is out. You don't want to go that way.
But having said that, we as humans, it's coming back to the human experience again, we as humans, we go that way. Sometimes we just go that way.
Yeah.
And I was listening again to some people that I was doing talks at the weekend. I was filming another lady who was talking about how she'd wanted to go and create some online product, blah, 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 and then she hit a kind of technology, you know, anti-technology, you know, I'm a spiritual kind of person, what do I want to do with technology kind of thing. She had to go like all around the houses of solving, she called it a spiral. So instead of going from A to B, you kind of spiral around B and getting closer and closer to it, but never quite getting there until you're ready. But along the way, she's like, you've learned all kinds of other things and you've overcome other stuff, etc., etc. So it was, although you thought A to B was perfect, you still have taken the perfect views. So Beck, my partner, you know, when I talk about the right direction, she goes, there's no right direction, it's all right, you know. So even when we're in our thinking and our ego's driving us and all the rest of it, you're still getting valuable input from that.
Mm-hmm. Well, yeah. What comes to me about that, Julian, is that I guess there's something sacred about the whole thing. There's something. There are opportunities for grace in every moment, in every situation. And there's something wonderful about human beings in whatever ways we get confused or tangled up and twisted up. There's never a time when there's not something essentially good and whole going on. And so it really is truly all perfect all the time. What varies is our experience of that perfection. And
Yep.
I think I would also say the degree to which we get to feel like collaborators, co-creators in the creative dance. But it is all perfect all the time. It's just how cool it's so cool when we can feel like participants in that perfection.
Oh, participants, that's quite an interesting one.
And we are participants anyway, but when we can actually feel and make conscious contributions or collaborations with what's unfolding.
Mm. So coming back to what we were saying earlier then, if I follow what you're saying, the less I have to dip my oar in and paddle, the better. It occurs to me. Let me be specific because this is quite an interesting. I wanted to just occurs to me to bring this in because you've been doing quite a lot with people in the past to help them build their online business or and so on. And Now, I wrote a book, I built an online product, I've started Hangouts, etc., etc. I haven't really done. It was just that I didn't set out to write a book to as a marketing device or anything. I set out to write a book because I was inspired to do. It just felt like the right thing to do at the time. And for a
Right.
while, it was just writing.
So I guess I would ask, what does it mean to paddle? If I'm writing a book because I'm inspired to, I would still call that paddling.
Okay. Okay. I guess it's when you it's when you pick the. So I have no real idea where my business is headed, what this work that I'm doing right now. So I started by writing a book. I filmed Dick and Bettinger. I put that into a product, and then other people allowed me to film it, and it's become like quite an interesting product now. And now I've set up a referral partner thing so that other people can share it and make money from it, and da da da. But at the same time, I've started to get involved with my local community, with a youth group that isn't is seen as a troublesome youth group nearby us, with old folk um, who can't get around on their own anymore. Anyway, a number of different situations. So, and I don't know where that's heading. It feels like those are the right things to be doing right now, you know.
Right.
So there's an element of co-creation because I'm choosing to do those things, but there's also an element of I don't see the bigger picture on this. I don't see those.
Yeah, I would agree with that, and that pretty much describes what's going on in my world as well. I've been volunteering with Amy Chen Mill's organization, the Center for Sustainable Change, and it just came to me to do that. I had a good feeling about it.
There's another going with the flow thing there because I've just sponsored their transforming the community from the inside out.
That's right. I saw that because I'm working on a poster for the Telesummit, and I saw that you were a sponsor. Yeah.
And it just those are such great initiatives that I just want to help whatever I can get them take a step forward. But it turns out that the subject matter for this year's Transform the Community is about parenting and bringing up children and so on, and it's like I'm dealing with these kids in this youth environment, and it's like, oh, that's going to be so useful. So again, it's like the pieces of the jigsaw puzzle kind of dropping into place.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
Is that the feeling as well? When you start to see some of that stuff happening for you.
What was that?
The feeling. Following the feeling.
Yeah, I would say that's following the feeling. And something just popped into my mind. My husband and I live in a very small town. I mean, it's not even a town. We have a post office and a convenience store and a gas station. And I work out of our home. I work virtually. 99% of my clients I work with by phone or Google Hangout or Skype. There have been many weeks where I don't go anywhere except the post office, and I'm perfectly happy doing that. And it just happens that this week, we were out on Monday night. On Tuesday night, we went to a film series at the local art museum, a nearby art museum. Last night, we went to a potluck with friends and saw a movie. Tonight, we've got a rehearsal for a singing group we're in. Tomorrow, we're having 4 people over for dinner. Saturday, we're going to a play reading. And so there are 6 nights out of this week that we've got commitments after a year of maybe going out once every 2 weeks.
Right.
And what's intriguing to me about this is there's no sense of hurry or bustle or pressure, and it's just really easy. It's just really easy. And maybe next week I won't go out at all. So there's a way in which being busy even feels different. It's like it used to be that a week like this would feel very busy, and this week doesn't feel busy at all. It's just one thing happens and then another thing happens, and I guess I'm not trying to squeeze more into the space, and I'm not fretting, will I get enough sleep tonight if I go to the blah blah and the blah blah. And it's just very interesting to me because it hasn't always been that way for me. There have been times when having this much going on would have felt busy to me and would have made me nervous. And so it just seems that this has something to do with the quality of going with the flow, because we've chosen to do all these things, but it feels very calm. It feels very flowing.
That's lovely. And I suppose if I go back to the change for me between my A to B life and how I live now, in my A to B, one of the things that happened for quite a long time was I'd wake up in the morning and I'd have, my mind would be creating the list of 15 things to do today. Almost Beck would say to me, I'd like set myself goals for each day, and if I do this, this, and this, then I've had a productive day.
Right.
And she'd like, oh, not that productive word again. But where it's got to now is, well, where it went to was then a kind of, I would take that initial list and I would throw it away and wait for something that came after it. It would, because I'd almost struggle with it for a bit. No, I'm not doing the list. No, I'm not. And the list would, and my thinking would be going, no, you need to call him. You need to do that. You need to build this. And I would struggle with, no, I'm not doing that, and I'm going to put that to one side for a minute. And then something would pop up. It would be like, oh, you haven't spoken to so-and-so for a while, or why not sit down and write something? You've really been wanting to write something about this. Why don't you just do that? And I'd go do that, and that feels good. And then, guess what? A lot of the other 15 other things on the list, I get rid of them anyway. Much quicker than I ever thought I was going to. Right. So it is that another aspect of the feeling is. I hope you can't. That's our other dog. If you can hear her barking in the background there, but that's another thing to do with the feeling. I think is that you just described. It's that kind of calmness and ease with which you take action on stuff.
Exactly.
When you're taking action that isn't calmness and ease, then that's kind of why that's paddling, I suppose.
Yeah, or paddling in a way that's not. It's going against the flow. Because again, I think maybe you and I just call paddling different things. I would say that writing my ezine, making videos, doing this hangout, going to the Three Principles conference, to those I'm paddling. I'm in a boat and I'm rowing along.
Yeah.
But I'm not struggling with my paddling. I'm not trying to go against the grain. Because we have the capacity to do things in life, so I think we might as well do them.
I mean, I suppose. Yeah, that's the difference for me. Is that I've done a little bit of whitewater rafting, and I can remember going in the clear bits where you hardly have to put the oar into the water,
Right.
Right. And you're going with the flow all the time, but when you get to the rapids, you're trying to kind of get to certain parts of the river to negotiate various rocks, etc. When you get into those places, you have to paddle really hard. The temptation is to paddle really hard. Now, and in fact, it takes a lot of paddling to get anywhere in a big current. But the people that are experienced in doing that stuff know that if you just position the boat right before you go into the rapids, again, you don't have to do much paddling.
You don't have to do as much, exactly.
In fact, you know, any paddling you might try and do is not really going to affect the outcome that much.
Mm-hmm.
But the other thing that's interesting to me is that, and this is a really big area at the moment as I see it, is there are a lot of people that get coaching on building their business. And I was with a guy at the weekend, and he was, oh, I'm being coached by somebody reasonably well known over here, and she's given me lots of homework to do. Like, I've got to go and book, you know, these events and do these and make these videos and da da da. And I'm like, wow, that sounds like paddling to me.
Yeah, it could be paddling with the stream, and it could be paddling against the stream. I think it really depends on the feeling going with it. There have been times in my work when I do virtually no planning, and other times when it just makes sense to plan. And that planning doesn't feel like, you know, controlling things. I might plan an itinerary for a trip to Europe, for example, and things could change on the way, and it doesn't have to be a problem. So I don't think that following what shows up means that we never make a plan. Never paddle. I just think it has everything to do with the feeling behind it.
Okay.
Because if you want to build a cathedral, there are a certain number of bricks you got to put in the wall. And I don't think that living from peace, appreciation, gratitude, and love means you don't draw up the blueprint for the cathedral and move all the stone and quarry the stone and cut it and place it. And I think you do all of that. But it's in a spirit of creating and possibility. Does that make sense to you? I mean, I don't think that going with the flow and following what shows up means just passively that you never take the initiative. I think taking the initiative is a gift.
I suppose I'm in a place where, coming back to, I don't know where I'm going. It's like, if I'm building a cathedral, I don't know what it's going to look like. You know, I just do some bits and I kind of go, oh, this is neat, let's build this bit. And then I go to another place and on the landscape and I go, oh, this is neat, let's have a look at you know, let's carve this out here. And slowly it's like that's where you're kind of trusting that there's something out there that's got the blueprint, because I haven't. I mean, there's some friends of mine who I was sitting with them and I was like, they were like talking to me about the autopilot. So if you have a guidance system, right, it kind of like not much of a leap of faith to kind of go, you can stick yourself, you are on autopilot, you are flying on a flight path, you are going to a destination. What the point is, you never know what that destination is, and it's when you try and figure it out, that's when again you get back into the struggling starts. So it's like back to trusting that the bits and pieces that I'm doing, building my business, and building my life are all going to come together and be a beautiful cathedral or whatever it is when I'm done.
Mm-hmm.
Or it may be like the Sagrada Familia. I'll take one step back like Gaudi did and get run over before I manage to finish the thing. I don't know, but what he produced was pretty damn, you know, it's a pretty beautiful thing, even though it's part built. So hey, don't know. So yeah, no. So I kind of look at these people, and I suppose for me, my living from a feeling says, I don't need to go and find a coach who's going to, you know, lay out the roadmap for me on how to build my business. On the other hand, I get these kind of, I don't know, egoistic things like, you know, when's it all going to happen? And why haven't we got thousands of viewers for this Hangout? And of course, we do get thousands of viewers for this Hangout because as time goes on, people come back and sample what we viewed, and the number of viewers goes up and up and up. So this is like not about the now. This is like we're doing something here for posterity, which is lovely. And
Right.
even seeing that is like trusting something bigger. Don't know where I'm going. I suppose I'm going somewhere about the success is not an outside in thing. It's not a when I have built my business to be a fantastic, you know, whatever it needs to be, dollars a year, revenue generating, da da da, and I've made the difference to X million people's lives, etc. I'll be successful. It's actually today we've had a lovely hangout, and you know, hopefully some people have watched it or will watch it, and it will make a difference to them. And it's just another piece in the jigsaw, which is turning out fine.
Right. Right. Yeah. Yeah, I think there's something here about um, about trust, wisdom, and action. That we can trust that the wisdom, the blueprint for life as a whole exists. And that when we have this nice feeling, what Sid calls the good feeling or the nice feeling, that at those times we have greater access to that blueprint and are more inspired. And I think that at times when we have that greater access, we may be inspired to do something that takes 10 steps. And so you might create a more elaborate plan out of that wisdom. And then because you're moving into the future with a plan, it's also important to stay in the moment as that plan evolves and as the days unfold. So we did some planning with the Center for Sustainable Change, and we did a lovely planning process. But it was informed by this commitment and awareness that at any moment in carrying out the plan, if it starts to feel like a struggle, or if wisdom suggests something else, hey, we stop. You know, we drop it and wait till we see the way clearly. So I don't think it's an either or. But there's, for me, following what shows up is engaging what shows up in the moment, which might be inspiration to design a cathedral, and then start building. And if in the building process I come across something I didn't anticipate, you know, open up again and see now what wants to happen.
I'm going to segue for a moment because there's what you've just said really resonates with me on this level, which is that you have stuff that happens to you in the moment, but at the same time, for me anyway, this is the way I experience it, and there's some stuff that I do that I'm inexorably drawn towards. I just keep moving in that direction. You know, even when I'm not thinking about it, when I'm not planning, if I look at where my feet are being placed as the next steps happen, it's in that direction. And that to me also, and I'm going to segue a bit further now, is you know, it's like love. You know, the person that I am in love with is we can have horrid days. We can have, you know, not particularly good about what's happening for us, but there's always that love. You can always feel it underneath everything.
Mm-hmm.
and to me, that's, I suppose maybe now I'm not talking about the waves or the surface of the water anymore. I'm talking more like the Gulf Stream, or what the currents are that run deeper.
Right, right, right. In fact, that strikes me as maybe a valuable metaphor. I know a couple of people who are watching this either live or on the replay who are particularly curious about how to both engage, like build the cathedral and trust the process at the same time. And with the ocean metaphor, we can learn to sail on the top. There are ways to sail skillfully and ways to not sail skillfully.
Right.
And so on the top of the ocean, we're doing our best to sail skillfully and to collaborate or cooperate with what's unfolding rather than go against it. And with all of that, we still know that basically what's really happening is we're being held up by the ocean. And that's always what's going on.
Lovely. That's lovely. I mean, and it really fits with, your ladies, how you can be heartened is by however hard you're working, or how much of a struggle it feels, or how you're experiencing life at the moment. There's always that deeper current. It's always that. You can always touch it.
Right.
And all you need is that little bit of clarity that you talk about to be able to touch it, that calmness and appreciation and gratitude, etc. And the moment you touch it, then you, as I think you say, is you just get you get that sense of, it's all okay. It's all on plan. Whatever the bigger plan is, I'm on it. I think that's a great place to leave it, actually, Molly.
That seems right to me, too. That sounds good, feels good.
Perfect. I'd love to thank you so much for doing this. I mean, it was really a bit of a chance encounter, us kind of getting together, so I'm really pleased that we've done it. Is there anything, in terms of people, this will be on my channel, so is there anything, how could people contact you if they'd like to connect with you and so on and so forth?
Sure. My website is shaboominc.com, which is SHABOOMINC.com.
Cool, and that's the best way they can contact you from there, can they?
Absolutely.
Perfect. Excellent. And I probably already talked about my book, Life Beyond Money, and Living from Wisdom, which is now turned into a fantastic online resource with lots of full trainings from great people, and the Stars of Wellbeing newsletter, which is where I just connect with people for once a week, and people can join me on my journey. So wherever that is headed.
Exactly.
Thank you so much for your time tonight.
You're so welcome. It was great, Julian. Thank you.
All right.